each area, you are going to be able to elect who you want to be representing you. There's not going to be a system where you're appointing persons, or a government minister is going to be appointing people to be able to be participating in the local governance. You, the people, get to decide who you want to represent you on these people assemblies. The proposed structure is for there to be one assembly in St. Lucie, St. Andrew, St. Joseph, St. John, and St. Thomas. The parishes of St. George, St. Peter, St. Philip, and St. James will have 2 assemblies. Christ Church will have 3, and St. Michael will have 4. This will account for a total of 20 people's assemblies, and membership can consist of an equal number of elected ex officio members, parish residents, and youth from secondary and tertiary educational institutions. Elections can be organized by the Electoral and Boundaries Commission, who can then publish the candidates' profiles. Now, these profiles will include all the areas that each candidate thinks will make them a good representative for their particular assembly. We want persons to emphasize how they have given back to society and how they have contributed in their communities, so that when persons have to vote, they have a roster of candidates that have a proven track record of being able to give back and to make things happen within their communities. The assemblies will be for a period of 3 years. The senior student body of each secondary school should elect 1 male and 1 female student to serve. The UE student body should elect 10 students. BCC and SJPI should elect each 5 representatives, and a total of 10 students will serve on each assembly. The 20 assemblies of approximately 30 members will have in total 620 members. Each People's Assembly will elect presiding officers and can meet to make decisions about and coordinate the work of the Assembly. The 20 Assembly chairpersons can form a caucus under a revolving chairmanship to make decisions about and coordinate the national duties of the 620 members. Parliament can include a financial allocation in government's annual estimates and budget to be divided equally amongst the People's Assemblies. Financial allocations will then be audited by the Auditor General. And it's at this point I will pause to emphasize to persons, everything that you are hearing and that we are discussing is a proposal. The purpose of these town halls is to make sure that you, the people, are comfortable with what we have come up with. And if you have any input, any additions, subtractions, we highly encourage you to have your say so that we can adjust the proposal so that it's inclusive of not just what we want, but what the people would like to see happen. And for the assembly town halls that we've had so far, we've had a robust discussion with the different members of the communities who've been able to give great supporting evidence as to why they think certain things should change. So we welcome and encourage that discussion to continue in the parish of St. Thomas. The functions of these proposed assemblies would include oversight of government agencies, which would establish oversight or public accountability committees for government agencies, performance that can provide critical services to improve efficiencies and accountability. The chairperson's caucus can select persons from the 620 members to carry out inspections, receive public complaints, meet with management to discuss issues and suggest remedies, and provide status reports to the public. We'll also have community well-being teams to build a community oversight and assistance program to protect children, elders, disabled persons, and needy residents in conjunction with the Department of Emergency Management. Thirdly, we'll have sanitation and road repairs to respond to emergency cases of garbage pileups, excessive overgrown bush or potholes, as well as general environmental protection and anti-littering campaigns. Fourth will be education. The Ministry of Education can consult with each assembly on school board appointments, or to select an assembly member for said boards. The Assembly members can also form a youth education and social development think tank to construct improvements. 5, we have community development and sports, which comprise of Assembly members, the National Sports Council, the Community Development Department, the NCF can oversee community development, sports, and cultural programs for the community centers of their assembly area within a community development department budget. 6, we have the area of vendor licenses. Each assembly can receive applications for wayside vending licenses, identify public locations for vendors, determine whether to issue licenses, inspect wayside vending locations, and ensure that proper environmental and other standards are maintained. Number 7 is the community forum. A quarterly community forum consisting of community and assembly members, as well as members of parliament, can discuss national affairs and pending bills. 8, planning permission. The Town and Country Planning Department can consult with the relevant assembly before approving applications for major construction or other physical development projects, particularly for areas of key interest such as beaches, historical sites, and so on. 9 is government development planning. Government ministries and agencies can consult with the assemblies in developing plans and strategies for areas such as roads, road repairs, public housing, health clinics, jobs for the unemployed, and sporting or recreational facilities. Number 10 is a people's cooperative. The government can provide each assembly with technical advice, material assistance, and land, property for a community-based cooperative business project, such as a food producing farm. And I know from some of the assemblies that town halls, that we went to, it was suggested that we should also have a commerce or innovation category added, and also one for culture retention. So those are also under discussion. At this point in the town hall, I will pass over to the Honorable Ambassador David Commichon so that he can comment on some of the additional submissions that we would have received and give a summary overview of what we would have heard so far.
Thank you, Crystal. I think you have been very comprehensive. One of the additional functions that was proposed during the town hall meetings was a community watch or community security function. The idea was that to kind of revive the neighborhood watches, but to take them to a higher, more collective level. So the idea is that especially young people, young males in particular, from the communities could be involved in an expansive neighborhood watch type of committee that will look after the security of the community. And of course, they could receive training in security procedures from an agency like the Royal Barbados Police Force. But I think you have done quite a good job. A number of the functions you mentioned were further fleshed out during the town hall meetings that we held. But the basic structures that you have mentioned were all relatively well approved by the persons that we spoke to in the various town hall meetings. I think what listeners may wish to bear in mind is that if you listen to these functions, it is clear that what we are dealing with here is a system of people's empowerment. It's a system that goes significantly beyond the typical local government idea. The local government idea tends to be simply about delivering services at a community level. But clearly, when you're talking about a community forum, when you're talking about community members engaging with members of parliament in discussing bills that might be before the parliament, advancing ideas, when you're talking about oversight committees, committees that will take some responsibility for ensuring that the standards of important government agencies that offer services to the people, like the Transport Board, Queen Elizabeth Hospital, Barbados Water Authority, the Royal Barbados Police Force, even the court system, that we have oversight committees that will be a kind of people's watchdog that will be there to ensure that high standards of service are maintained, that will be there to take complaints from the public, but also to engage with the management of these agencies and to report back to the people. It is clear that you're going significantly beyond just the provision of services, and you're really talking about empowering the people of Barbados. And one of the reasons we feel so confident that this system can work in Barbados is because we have a lot of confidence in the capacity of the Barbadian people. You know, we can't help but take note of the fact that in Barbados we have an extremely well-educated, well-trained, literate population. And we feel that there's a lot of potential in our society for a more people participatory form of governance, that we have not properly exploited the potential that exists in our country for the involvement of the citizens of Barbados in the administration and decision-making processes of their country. So this is an effort really to utilize that underutilized potential. I think I will leave it there, Crystal, and I think it'd be good that we get a chance to engage with the listening and viewing audience.
Okay. If at this point there's anyone that would like to make a contribution, we welcome your comments. You can raise your hand so that you can be unmuted, or you can put your comments in the chat. We're also following on Facebook. So if you have any comments that you'd like to place there, you are free to do so.
So just one thing, you mentioned when you were speaking about the environmental function, you referred to it as sanitation and road repairs committee. But I think the consensus is that we need to do away with sanitation, and we need to stress environment and an environment committee, and that environment committee will deal with a whole range of issues. You mentioned some of the first ones that we thought about: emergency cases of garbage pileups, excessive overgrown bush, but in the town hall meetings, we were directed to other environmental concerns, inclusive of refuse recycling and beach preservation programs, the policing the offensive setting of fires to burn rubbish in the community, potholes in community roads of the Assembly area, the need for repairs to roads, community signage and bus stops, and the list goes on. So that during the course of the town hall meetings, that particular function was really fleshed out into all of its full and environmental dimensions. Similarly, the idea of the vendors' licenses, we came thinking specifically about wayside vendors, but during the course of the town hall meetings, fish vendors were included, taxi operators were included, for example. So the idea was that the People's Assembly would be in a very good position to identify areas in the community that could accommodate wayside vendors, fish vendors, even taxi operators. So again, it is about, as you said, about removing some of that decision making from central government and placing it into the hands of community representatives.
At this point, not seeing any comments in the chat. So what I will do is to give a summary of some of the comments we would have received, where persons would have given some idea about the size of the people's assemblies that they would want. Some persons thought that 30 might have been too much, whereas others thought it wasn't enough. We also would have asked persons questions such as whether they support a system of local government in Barbados. We would have also discussed whether we think the assembly should be non-partisan, what persons would expect the minimum age for membership on the People's Assemblies to be. And there was a lot of discussion as to whether you should go below the age of 18 and if you should even establish an age limit. We discussed whether the proposal for each assembly to comprise a mix of elected private persons who live in a geographical area should also have persons who are nominated from specific departments within the public service. So far, the general consensus is that most people agree that it should be nonpartisan, and generally, they also agree that we should have an election rather than persons being selected. There was mixed response with regards to whether people wanted a local government or not. Within the assembly town hall meetings, yes, we got a lot of support, but then there were persons online who had the idea that it was going to cause yet another layer of governance. And we wanted to make it clear that this level of governance is supporting the idea that ordinary Barbadians will be able to have the opportunity to have their say on what happens within community areas. So as it stands right now, we have a great number of persons who would have to rely on what happens within Parliament at that level and have laws and regulations passed down in the usual manner. And there's very little consultation or involvement with the people at times. This system is trying to change that piece by piece, to be able to put power into your hands, to be able to know what is going on, to be able to say, these are the areas that we want to have looked at. And even some of the examples we've given when it comes to road repairs, if you in your community, you have that knowledge because you live there, that there are particular roads that would require, that have greater use, or that the community has a greater need of where repairs are concerned, your input will be given to make sure that those are given priority. So it's not, another thing that has come up as well too is that it's going to be a lot of money and everything else. That's also not the case, because the idea is with the community's input, rather than having funds wasted on areas that the community does not think that they need, those funds would then be allocated to areas that the community has decided we as a collective think this is the most important area. So rather than have government funds wasted in areas that the community does not want to happen, there will be greater engagement to make sure that they're funneled towards the areas that persons are interested in. Another area that we looked at and examined was whether we think that nominated public servants should sit on the assembly in his or her capacity as a public servant or as a member of the community. Noting that each assembly may cover more than one constituency, what do you think the relationship should be, if any, between the People's Assembly and the parliamentary representative? We also asked if sessions of the assembly should be conducted in public And we also asked persons when they wish to see a local government implemented in Barbados. And at this point, given the feedback that we've received so far, we've decided that we are going to aim to have our proposal with everyone's input included given to government by November 30th so that it will be a gift to Barbadians for the season of independence. So if you have any comments or anything else, I see a hand up from Deveron Bruce. We can have him unmuted so that he can make his contribution to the town hall.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Minister Ford, Ambassador Commission, and MP.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone.
So it was mentioned that one of the ideas around the committee would be to have a level of oversight over central government. Now, that is interesting because now I'm asking what would be, or what do you envision the organizational strengths of the committees would be and the legal legitimacy over central government when it comes to issues of oversight and accountability, because many of the issues that we know exist in the communities are well ventilated. Roads, transportation, garbage, we already know what these issues are. So it is not a situation of the lack of that knowledge being there. It is really the inability to get those who are responsible for acting to act. So what organizational strengths are you going to put into place? What legal mechanisms are you going to put into place to see whether or not you actually have some teeth, as opposed to highlight what we already know? That's where we'll begin.
If I may respond, the idea is to have oversight committees pertaining to government agencies that provide direct and important services to people in the community. So we're not talking about all government agencies, but the ones that that really touch the community in a big way. So the hospital, the polyclinics, the transport board, water authority, the welfare department, for example. And the idea is that we would develop legally established protocols. So, in other words, the People's Assembly system would develop, let's say, a QEH oversight committee. A protocol would be established to outline how that committee will engage with the management of the QEH. So it would be, the protocol will be in black and white. And it would be, so both sides would know what the procedure is. The Oversight Committee, for example, would have the ability to enter certain parts of the premises, to scrutinize the operations of the institution. It will have the ability to take complaints from the public. It would then have the ability to call meetings with the management of the institution, to discuss with the management of the institution the complaints, what the people are saying, what are the possible remedies, to get commitments from the management of the institution, to follow up with the management of the institution to see whether remedies that were agreed upon are implemented, and then to report back to the community or the general public. You see, so that is the basic idea, and central to it will be that there will be an established legal protocol that gives the People's Assembly Oversight Committee certain rights to inspect, to call for meetings, to discuss remedies, to have follow-ups, and so forth. That would be my answer, Deveron. I hope that sheds some light.
It certainly did, and I'm glad to hear that they will have some kind of legal standing regarding engagement. No.
Devron, before you go to your next question, may I add to what David has quite eloquently said? And I think I said this last week when we had the program on CBC TV, that a People's Assembly is established by an act of Parliament, so that the relationship between the people in the community and the public service or the government ceases to be a casual relationship. It now becomes formalized by an act of Parliament. So that answers your question as to legality and legal legitimacy. They now become bodies corporate, yes? And in other words, they become a department of government, so that it is no longer a question of a pressure group or a lobby group pressuring government to do something. This is now one government department populated by the people genuinely within the community, communicating with another government department. So David mentions to you the protocols which would be established between the People's Assemblies and the government. But even before you reach that operational stage, there is the establishment of the People's Assembly as a body corporate established by Act of Parliament. So that and there are responsibilities that flow when as between government and the, and when I say government, I mean central government. There are responsibilities that flow and exist as between central government and the People's Assemblies, because it is established by an act of Parliament. In other words, it is a legal body. It is a body established by law, so that the relationship ceases to be casual. You cannot say, well, I am ignoring them because I don't recognize that group. The group is recognized in law by a law passed by Parliament. And I don't think the public nor the public service, the established public service, should be afraid of this. The relationship should always be non-hostile, because we're seeking to establish a partnership between government and the people in the community. So I know people tend to defend territory, so to speak. And it would not be a question of defending territory, but it would be a question of allowing central government to make decisions based on consultation with the people in the communities, and those people would be represented by the People's Assembly. So I don't foresee a problem. There will be sensitivities, there will be people who seek to defend territory, but as things evolve, I suspect the relationship would become quite smooth when central government and its departments realize that the People's Assemblies are really there in partnership with government. I hope I've been of some help there, Ron.
Most definitely, and that consultation is definitely important, and it really points to the necessity of the committees and the commissions and what have you. Now, this really leads into my second question. You mentioned that a body corporate essentially will be established, and it will be through an act of Parliament. But we know that there are a variety of aspects that are body corporates essentially in government. There are many aspects of government that have been established through law, that have been established through whatever. And yet their effectiveness is called into question, often based on issues surrounding funding, for instance. Many, even senior entities, would complain that they do not have the sufficient funding in order to deal with certain things and in order to address their basic mandates. And maybe it's the pessimist in me, but particularly oversight bodies, for instance, tend to run themselves into those issues because they're almost a threat to the politics of the situation. So, for instance, the Auditor General has long complained about the lack of resources, and this is a position that has been established by the Constitution and supposed to be established and protected by the Constitution, and yet he often complains about the insufficient funding. So how then do we ensure that our local communities have the necessary independence regarding funding? I'm assuming that currently the idea around it will be that Parliament will fund the local committees. But again, you may run yourself into a situation now where local committees may counter or may cause some ruckus essentially with the body politic of the national. And therefore, you may run yourself in a situation where those committees and communities are underfunded because of that circumstance. So what ideas now do you have to ensure that there's a level of financial independence between the national and the community?
Deveron, well, the first point we have to make is that we understand we don't live in a perfect world. We understand the realities of the economic situation in Barbados. So we understand that we have to develop a People's Assembly system that is based on those realities. So yes, we would begin with an admission that we don't expect that the People's Assembly system will be awash in financial resources. But we feel that a lot of what we are trying to do is not really about financial resources. It is about people's involvement. It is about bringing people together, organizing people for action. So for example, those oversight committees, in my opinion, don't call for a lot of financial resources. What they call for is committed people. People who are committed to see the public sector of Barbados lift their standards, people who are committed to see that there's accountability of government agencies to the people, and who are willing to give up their time to go and inspect government facilities, to listen to complaints from the public, to engage in meetings and so forth. So we take it as a given that, and especially in this COVID-19 situation, that we are not going to be operating on the basis of a luxury of financial resources. However, the idea of the funding for the People's Assemblies is that the assemblies will receive an annual grant from central government. Probably it will be a modest amount. In addition to that, the assemblies will have the power to engage in their own fundraising. For example, you may have individuals or businesses within the assembly area who are impressed with the work of the assembly and want to make a contribution to the coffers of the assembly. So I don't think assemblies are going to be restricted from either accepting financial donations. Of course, there are going to have to be proper financial rules and regulations as to how donations may be accepted and how assemblies have to account for money and spend money and so forth. So those financial regulations will have to be put in place. But we basically see the assemblies functioning on the basis of annual grants from central government, donations from members of the public, particularly their own community members, and of course any independent fundraising efforts that they could engage in themselves. Anybody else?
Devron, you still there?
Yes, I certainly am.
I wanted to add to what David said. Look, I'm willing to admit that we're trying to create the perfect system here. And while trying to create the perfect system, we acknowledge that we're not going to create the perfect individuals because the people who populate these assemblies will be fallible, they'll be they'll have human frailty. So that while you create a perfect system, it will have the weaknesses of any other system that is subject to the frailties of mankind. I just want to say to you as well that, and this is in response to what Ambassador Comachon said just now, we are in a period of consultation here, and we're accepting suggestions from the public. And I want to inform the public that even among us, there is always a divergence of opinion. Now, David says that the Assembly can open itself to accepting donations from members of the public, which is to say private individuals. I meet that with a certain skepticism because we may be exposing ourselves to what we try to avoid at national level, in which individuals who have financial power are able to purchase influence within government departments, and this would be a department of government. So that is something that I would be prepared, David, to approach with some skepticism. Yes, you can raise funds, but you did make the point. Yeah, you did make the point that it would be subject to certain very strict regulations, so that they can. I would foresee that if a company or an individual donates money to the People's Assembly, it must be disclosed publicly, that there should be no secret donation of monies. The monies, Devron, that I foresee. Yes.
Ralph, bear in mind that central government itself accepts donations in money and in kind from philanthropists, from companies. Right now, for example, with the Ministry of Education accepting all kinds of tablets. But the point is that if you are a business that is located within a People's Assembly area, and you believe in the work that the Assembly is doing, and you want to help support that work and finance that work, I would not see anything wrong with you wanting to make a financial donation.
Let it be made public.
Yes, obviously you're going to have proper rules
Yes.
and regulations,
Yeah.
because we don't want any kind of corruption.
Precisely.
So yes, and this is where I guess the Auditor General will be important. Just to let Deveron and everybody else know that, for example, we are talking about elections, and we are engaging the Electoral and Boundaries Commission to guide us in relation to elections and to have the elections done under their auspices. So similarly, if we are talking about financial regulations, we will have to engage an entity like the Auditor General,
Yes.
for example, to make sure that everything is well done and is quite above board.
Yes. Yes. Still with us?
Yes, I am. I would like to speak one final question in if I'm allowed.
Go ahead.
I am in agreement with Minister Thorne regarding the concerns for funding, but I also understand the ambassador's point regarding, if a person wants to donate and it's
Devron, that's why we're here. We're here to thrash out these issues. That's why we've come to the public. We've
Yes,
come to the
definitely.
public as a body with divergent views. So let us thrash it
Precisely.
out. Yes, thank you very much. Continue, please.
And my final point, really, or question would be, structurally, how do you envision we ensure the longevity of the communities, essentially? Because this is not the first time we've approached community governance. The previous administration gave a task, or rather took a hit at it, and I believe it was talked about before as well. But politics tends to get in the way, particularly around good ideas and particularly around good attempts. And you may have all the energy that you have right now, but the priority regarding this may very well change when an administration changes as well. And it's not only at the administrative level or the national level, but the constituency level as well, because the personnel that are involved often drive the support and often drive the effectiveness of an organization. And when there's turnover for that organization, or turnover of personnel rather, you tend to lose some of the support, you tend to lose some of the rhythm. So how do we ensure then that St. Thomas is working in 2020, but then in 2022, St. Thomas loses all of its rhythm and nobody cares about community governance anymore? How do we ensure longevity of these entities?
One guarantee of longevity is to insulate the People's Assemblies from the manipulation of partisan politics. In other words, do not allow political parties to manipulate the People's Assemblies. We are not so naive as to believe that persons who belong to political parties will not come into the People's Assemblies ultimately with a political motive. But it is up to the people who populate the People's Assemblies, and to the persons within that geographical group that have voted for the People's Assembly. It is up to them to continue to insulate it from the control of political parties. Because, as you know, a political party, the purpose of a political party is to win the government, is to win political power. And if that is the motive, you cannot contaminate or taint the work of a People's Assembly by having that as the motive of the People's Assembly. So my short answer to your question, the guarantee as to survival and longevity is to insulate it from the narrow interests of political parties. And that is why all of us, all 11 of us, are united in that view that the People's Assembly must remain pure and free of partisan taints. Yes.
To add to that, to Devron, the assemblies are driven by the community. And we have, in every community in Barbados, a number of people who know, who live and breathe the activities of the community. They know what is good, they know what's bad. They know who come in to the community, they know all the illegal activities that go on in the community. Those are the people who have to drive the committees, who have to drive the assemblies, the people in the community. You talk about the length of the particular committees. Well, again, it depends on those people. If we could get those managers, as they call them, or community practitioners to come out to these assemblies, and we have done that so far where we have gone. I didn't want to give you an example. We were in West Parish at a meeting some time ago, and after the meeting, a contractor who lives in the neighborhood came forward after the meeting and told us that he's going to donate grit and marl to fix any potholes in West Parish. So what we have to do if the assembly is finally given the approval and so on, is to get that information from that particular contractor and pass it on to the relevant authority, which will be the MPW depot in that area. No cost at all. And that person is a community-minded person. So we could go that route very easily. And that doesn't cost much. Yes, Devon?
Yes, I take everybody's points and I'm in full agreement. And I think that's really where it would end off. Really, the longevity of this project is definitely going to be difficult, but necessary. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, man.
Can I make one small comment?
Yes, Minister, please.
Please, and I'm speaking now as a resident of St. Thomas.
Oh.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to add to where you would have left off, and Adrian, you were onto it, where in the past we had community groups functioning in a way par excellence to any others that I have ever known about. And of course, it is this spirit of volunteerism that has brought us thus far. So as a child, we had lodges, what we call the Bright Star Lodge, where we will save our 10-cent and 25-cent coins and so that at Christmas time we could buy our Christmas shoes and all that. We had development councils. We have neighborhood watches right now. We have disaster management. We used to call it zero. And everybody, that's how we learned in 1955 when we had Hurricane Jeanette about the storm carpenters. Everybody came out to help in the community. And I believe that this is another step forward. And yes, I agree with the proper coordination of it. We heard about what happens if we get funds. And I think that is critical too, because we must make sure that everything is above board in that respect. Right now, we have the parish independence committees. We have the regathering committees, and they are all doing excellent work and have been doing work, especially the PICs, from since 1995 or 96. And I believe that there are persons in the community who want to volunteer their services, but they are a little taken aback. And I agree. If the political aspect of it seeks to overshadow and to criticize and to malign people and their character in that way, then it turns people off. I believe that as we go through 2020, 2021, that as a people, we need to come together to see how best we can glue or pull our thoughts together, that at the end of the day, it is our community. We know of persons who have been going around in regathering and cleaning up locations. They've been going to schools and doing storytelling. They've been working on environmental projects. These are the things that we want to see them properly established and given that longevity that we talk about. There's a lot of rich talent across the length and breadth of Barbados in every parish. And I believe that this People's Assemblies will help to strengthen the areas that are existent, and for those that are not, we can now start to look at the development councils and so, and work, yes, with governmental institutions. There's nobody who knows communities in Barbados like the local people. There are some senior men who could tell you every place you can find a well. And we suffer from so much so many drainage problems. And so on. These old men can tell you how these wells on the plantation used to be cleaned every year to be able to make sure that the flow of water did not impact on those in the village. I believe that we still have people who will do it and do it on that voluntary basis, and we can make a tremendous difference in hand holding them and making sure that everything is above board in order for us to do this together as the communities, as the parishes. And we notice it says parishes, work together in parishes as we do with disaster management. And I'm sure that we can make a tremendous difference and set the examples for others to follow. We've done it already. We can do it again to be able to empower our people. And we will see who are the emerging leaders as a result of this exercise. So I will just give way to the residents whom I'm sure will want to put in their 10 cents worth and to see how best we can get as many ideas as possible coming through so that we can have a workable aspect of things, a workable solution to some of the challenges we now face, where because we have a problem, we call the member of parliament or we call a politician. That's not the way that we've ever lived in Barbados. I never knew a politician until the late great Tom Adams came. But people in the villages were doing things before, and therefore we can get back to the basics. We can work in association with them in order for us to identify the real critical areas. But it is important that we come together as a people and chart our own course to show the politicians, to show the other persons in this society, we can do it together and successfully so. So that is my 5 cents worth. Thank you very much.
We have some comments on the Facebook thread that I'd like to include. So we have persons that are agreeing that they want to make sure that the people's assemblies have the necessary teeth to effect the changes as required, which is something that came up in some other town halls where persons were concerned that you call water authority because there's a burst pipe and it takes weeks, sometimes months, to be able to get anything actioned, or you have to embarrass them by going on social media and it going viral, or you have to call somebody that you know. So there was concern expressed as to how we were going to make sure that the people's assemblies, those members, that their concerns were going to be properly adhered to. We also have another comment. I'm trying to scroll down. There was another suggestion that rather than to rely on government to fund, why can we not fund ourselves? And I know we did discuss this as well, and I hope that that question was answered, that government is currently tasked with COVID-19. If this is our community, why not come together and be involved and even put in our own 25 cents? And there was another suggestion where persons was, in terms of the idea of it being a doorway for corruption, having donations from communities, that was also expressed as a concern. And someone made a suggestion that they would prefer if the financial donations were made towards a project and not necessarily the people's assemblies. And I'm guessing this is similar to what was suggested with the tablets, where rather than the government receiving a donation, that particular project or drive was what was receiving the donations. So it gave a bit more transparency in that process. But as an auditor, I do also heavily advise that there should be controls put in place to make sure you prevent any corruption, because once it gets to the point of the Auditor General's report, the damage has already been done and he's trying to get things corrected after the fact. If we can put controls in place to make sure that any financing that comes to the commission for any projects or anything has proper controls and transparency, then I think we will be able to avoid ever ending up in one of his reports. We also have Sandy Walcott saying that she concurs and that proper management systems should be in place to effectively manage the project. We have, I'm not sure how to pronounce this Facebook name, but he's saying it's an interesting session and he's glad that these forums are being made available. He's curious about what the real purpose of this local group is. He wonders if a number of the examples cited, such as garbage, water, transport, road repairs, wouldn't be better managed as part of a longer-term central national plan. It sounds like additional layers of red tape to slow the implementation of real beneficial action that benefit the constituents. What I'm even more worried about is the allocation of funds. So that seems to be a general fear that persons have, and understandably so. We have had obviously a history of funds being misallocated in Barbados or spent poorly or wasted. So it's understandable that persons will have this concern. They have another sentence, but I'm asking for clarification where that one is concerned, and hopefully they will provide that soon. And yes, in terms of local elections, the persons who will be sitting on these assemblies will be elected by members of the community. That's why we're emphasizing that persons will provide their, we didn't use the word CVs, but word is
Community profiles. Community profiles.
Community profiles, yes, thank you. That persons will submit their community profiles so that the persons in the community who have to vote for them will be able to see what their credentials are and be able to have some comfort that these are persons who have contributed to their communities in a significant way, and that they're getting persons who will lobby and fight for their causes. Because we do understand that this is going to be a difficult process. It's new. And you know what? Something is new. Persons are going to fight against it because it's not what they're accustomed to. So the persons you elect, they're going to have to be very strong individuals who are going to be able to lobby for the causes that your community has identified as important. If you decide that this road is the one that you want to have fixed instead of what has been decided, they're the ones who are going to lobby for you. So I'm guessing that some debating skills are going to be really essential in there as well. Let's make no mistake or have any illusions that this is going to be a very smooth sailing process. We know how things are in Barbados, but if we do want to see change, we are going to have to be those agents of change, and we're going to have strong convictions in fighting for what we want and in fighting for us being able to have a say. So I don't know if any, before going to any more of the comments on Facebook, if any of the others on the panel would like to have an input into some of the comments that we've heard so far.
I think it's important that we emphasize that assemblymen and women will not be paid. That it is a volunteer effort. It is you're being asked to give back to your community as a national service, national duty. So I think that's important. The other thing is the People's Assemblies are not going to be taking over the functions of central government. Let's get that very clear. They're not going to be taking over the functions of members of parliament, of ministers of government. What they're going to be doing, one function will be they're going to be putting pressure to demand accountability and high standards of performance of particular government departments. Number two, they're going to be adding value to some of the services provided by central government. Number three, they're going to be giving intelligence. They're going to be making inputs. They're going to be bringing the ideas of the people to central government to make the work of central government more informed and more in tune with the needs and demands of the people in the community. So for example, as we said, the People's Assembly is going to guide the different ministries and departments of central government about the needs of the people in their assembly area. Where the need for, where that you might need an infant's, what was the thing? anyhow, a polyclinic, where you might need a health center, where you might a day nursery. That was the word. That was the word. I'm searching for. Where you may need a day nursery to be located. Where you might have a particular problem with large pockets of unemployment that are festering and causing social malignancy, and government needs to intervene and help with that situation. So, the People's Assembly will be adding value to central government, not taking over, not adding any new level of bureaucracy, no. And I think if we think of it in terms of people empowerment, I think that is the better concept. If we remain wedded to the idea of the traditional system of local government, I think we will miss the crux of this. This is really about people's empowerment than anything else.
As to what David was saying, as it is right now, because of the hard economic times, there are a number of people in each community who are suffering because they can't get food on the table. And you will find that there's a Miss Lashley in Rock Hall, and her neighbor, Miss Jones, can't put food on the table to feed her 3 children. And this old lady readily prepares food for those 3 children. Government can't do everything. The welfare department is overwhelmed. The government will be trained to give out grants and 2 different vouchers every month, but they can't cover the whole community. And as it is now, this kind of assistance that we're getting from the community practitioners in each area has to be emphasized and expanded, and it can only be done through People's Assembly. So this is why we are here. This kind of volunteerism, and we're asking for, again, nothing at all to do with the politicians. You look after your neighbor, you look after your community, and there are people in every district in Barbados who are willing to come forward and assist. They don't need no recognition, they don't need no financial help. Some of them might ask you for it, but they do it out of the kindness of the heart. As the minister said something ago, we can go way back to the old time days where people look after your neighbor. Now we have districts and communities where people don't talk. You don't know who's your next door neighbor. I live in a gap, about 15 houses, and 14 houses in that gap have their gates closed. You can't turn in. The garbage truck, the police van, the postman can't go in your gap because the gate closed. They don't have no dogs. But everybody into there's so much selfishness. So we are trying to bring the community back together and bring back life. Correct. You sound like Crystal?
Adrian, we want turning people gap for?
You gotta turn around. The garbage truck gotta turn to get your garbage. Oh, you can't get in?
Oh, my goodness. We actually received some clarification on one of the points that was made on Facebook. The person was making a comment that they don't think the Auditor General's office would be effective in the assistance that we are speaking of. I would like to clarify that the Auditor General's office, with the limited resources that he has, is probably one of the few effective offices right now. The problem is what happens after. So we have to separate his role from what we expect. He makes the report, he highlights the deficiencies. We do have a disconnect between what happens with his report after the fact. He's not the one that's able to enforce having persons brought to account for what is reported in his annual report. And that is a very serious problem in Barbados. I'm not going to even pretend that it isn't. And I do understand the concerns that if we're going to be having any kind of reports or discrepancies, we want to make sure that they're adequately handled. But in terms of the Auditor General, he's the one person that's actually on our side and doing an excellent job. We do need to have more enforcement and accountability. So I do agree with that commenter. Some other comments, let me make sure I don't miss any. If anyone wants to comment in the meantime, that's fine as well. but there are more comments on Facebook.
Hey there again. Dev Bruce again.
No problem. Go ahead.
Something was raised that really jogged my thought process there. The fact that there is really going to be a hierarchy of needs regarding a community. So how would you approach that situation? Because everybody can't get what they want. Would you look at population density of the area, the seriousness of it, the length of the problem? Would you create a lottery system to determine how and where and when certain activities within that community would commence and be funded?
I will
Be a
say
little
what
be a little bit more specific, Deveron. I'm trying to get to the crux of what you're asking, but could you be a little bit more specific?
Okay, I'm a resident of St. Thomas, and I go to a committee meeting, and they say that road number A I want road number A to be fixed, whereas another individual says that they want road number B to be fixed, and then somebody says, no, I want something else to be done. How do you determine the hierarchy of needs regarding how we are going to act based on the various issues that the community may face? But you have it based on the density of the area, the seriousness of the problem, the length of time the problem existing. But you have a lottery system to determine when you start on which. How would you approach that?
Devron, that's why you would have a people's assembly. A resident goes to the public meeting, the public hearing of the people's assembly, and the people's assembly would make the final decision based on all that you have said. And Devron, I hope that you have made a written submission to us. Have you?
Yeah, eventually we will.
Please do, and do so soon.
What I will add to this is, as the chair rightly said, it will be up to the people's assemblies how they make those decisions. But my professional advice, when we have these you have limited resources, and obviously everybody's going to want their particular area addressed. And what we usually do in these scenarios is to do a risk-based approach, where we look at which area has the most need. So you have several factors that you take into consideration. If you have 3 different roads, and let's say for argument's sake, you have a split decision to make, you can then use other factors if the gathering of persons are evenly split in trying to determine which road takes priority. You can look and see which one might pose a greater danger to the residents. So even though for road B and C, you have 10 persons all agreeing A, B, and C should be done, but if road A is the one that is more dangerous if it is not fixed, that can be a factor that would push that to be in a higher priority. If road C is one that only a few people use, you could say, well, that's a lower priority. But these are just suggestions for how persons can make those decisions based on the limited resources. But obviously, each assembly is going to come up with their own system as to how they're going to determine what takes priority. But we would hope that persons take these recommendations, because you still want that the residents are as safe as possible and that the decisions are made on a fair basis.
Well, I would like to share a little bit more about the community well-being teams, because with what we are experiencing now and some of the social and economic fallout, I think these teams are going to be very, very important going forward. And this was one of the functions that was actually fairly extensively fleshed out during the town hall meetings. We began with this idea. We said each people's assembly could establish a community well-being team comprised of members of the assembly, as well as of any other persons who are co-opted by the assembly to carry out the function of developing a comprehensive community oversight and assistance program designed to ensure that children, elders, disabled persons, and needy residents of the assembly area are all properly looked after, and that no one is permitted to fall through the proverbial cracks. Then, in our town hall meetings, this is what was added. The community well-being team would be expected to take cognizance of all aspects of the well-being of community members, inclusive of such issues as child abuse, and domestic violence. The community well-being team should also concern itself with the emotional, psychological, and cultural condition of community residents, particularly the youth. A relevant government agency such as the Community Development Department should be charged with organizing relevant initial training for such community well-being teams. The members of Parliament of the People's Assembly area should be entitled to refer cases of in-need residents to the Community Wellbeing Team for its follow-up action. The Community Wellbeing Teams should also be required to liaise with all relevant government agencies. In addition, the Community Wellbeing Team should put together a database of all private entities and skilled individuals within the Assembly area who may be able to assist in responding to the needs of at-risk residents. So, a very, very fertile and creative concept of an institution that could really play a critical role in ensuring and looking after the well-being of our communities. So, as Adrian was saying, we looking after ourselves in a very organized way and deploying all of the skills and resources that we have within our communities to look after the community. Over to you, Crystal.
Okay. Just to clarify, one of the comments on Facebook is not the state elections that the People's Assembly will be involved with. It is the elections for those that we would like to represent each assembly, which is at the local governance level. So you're going to have 30 persons. Residents within the community area are going to vote for who those 30 persons will be. So those are the elections that we are referring to. We also have a comment from Giovanni Hunt. In the grand scheme of government, which branch would these local assemblies fall under among the legislature, executive, and judiciary? Could these be considered a fourth branch in some way, or would these fall under the executive?
Question. My own suggestion is that a People's Assembly should derive its financial life through Parliament. And if that is the case, I would think you would want the People's Assembly to derive from Parliament. I don't know that it should derive from the executive. I don't know, as in the last system, if a minister should make fairly important determinations as to the life and the viability of the constituency. I would want to no, it can't be a separate arm of the state at all. Constitutionally, the state remains the judiciary, the parliament, and the executive. He wants to know under which one it would fall. I would think that it should fall under parliament as that third arm of the state, and not the executive. The executive tends to have a measure of control that you may wish to avoid. But again, that is open to public discussion. I feel that it should fall as a representative body of the people. I think it should fall under parliamentary supervision, as opposed to the supervision of the executive.
Yeah, parliament, but it is not a parliament. It is not carrying out a parliamentary function. But
insofar as it represents people.
Well, yeah, but it's not a law-making function like parliament. But I don't know if all the niceties of constitutional law are really required. But I take the point that it will be established by Parliament. It would be accountable to Parliament. It will report to Parliament. There will obviously be annual reports that would need to be laid before Parliament. In terms of its administration, there would probably be a central administrative unit that will service it, that will provide central administrative services for it. And that unit may very well be located in the Ministry of People's Empowerment and Elder Affairs, because the idea is that we want to minimize expense. So we know that we need some, it will need some administrative support. But I think where we are going with this is to have some kind of central administrative unit so you don't duplicate and you keep expenses to a minimum. And maybe that would be located in one of the ministries. But very much a creature of Parliament, established by Parliament, reporting to Parliament,
yes.
and accountable to Parliament.
Yes, correct.
Okay. I'm really enjoying the discussion that we're having. It's very robust. And we have more comments on Facebook. I'm just trying to make sure we keep track of all of them. We have Mr. Roach stating that politicians were volunteers before it became a commercial industry. It was a noble job today. It is a career. So hopefully we can have persons having more focus on being able to perform their duties so persons don't walk away with that impression, and the areas that we can do for ourselves, we be able to do those for ourselves and not having to be relying on a politician. We have another comment that this should not fall under national government. We have Mr. Nigel Pierre making the statement that he agrees empowering the people who live in the communities will bring back the community spirit. And if that is achieved, then that is a win. We need to go back to the days of yore and rely on ourselves, but with teeth, and not to be another link to government or a rung on the ladder. Just the community, using community spirit, working together. So thank you, Nigel Pierre, for those comments. See what else we have here. We have persons recommending that Mr. Deveron Bruce join one of the People's Assemblies. If his community votes for him, this is a matter where we can appoint anyone. This is why we keep emphasizing, and I actually didn't say it tonight, but I definitely want to say it, you get who you vote for. Vote for persons who are going to have your community's best interests at heart. If you vote for persons who only have their own interests at heart, then you get the People's Assembly that you put together. Once these things start, it's out of our hands. We as the commission members, we don't have any influence or control after that as to who you would select, other than to hopefully persuade you to choose wisely. That's the extent of it. We're not picking anyone, we're not selecting anyone. No one from government has the ability to pick or select anyone. We only have the power of persuasion. I hope that we can persuade you more so than those who have political aspirations to choose persons who have your community at heart. I cannot emphasize that enough.
But Mr. Bruce is from St. Thomas. He just put his hand and raised it in the air. He's willing to go to join us.
I don't know if Mr. Bruce is from St. Thomas.
He said so.
I'm going to talk about this. He's from St. Thomas.
He said so, yes.
Okay.
The minister might know him, you never know.
So while you're, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
While you're looking for other comments, I just want to make the observation that, and we all agree that we need a more vibrant community life for these organs to get going. And over the last 40 years, we have, as a society, modernized, but we have not developed. We've become more modern, but modernization and development are two different things, and we have declined socially. There's not a lot of interaction in the communities in Barbados, and sometimes you need a project to get community life going. David would have referred earlier to the neighborhood watches, but and they tell me, the police have told me, that when crime drops, the neighborhood watches dissolve. And a lot of the neighborhood watches now are conducted by the WhatsApp technology. so that the individual or the personal interaction is not taking place in a lot of communities. And that's what I mean when I talk about a society having modernized, as Adrian said, people living behind their gates, driving away in their cars, but there's no social development, there's no social interaction, there's no community sense, there's no community strategy of tackling problems. And I want to be invidious here. A few years ago, everybody knows I'm a politician. A few years ago when I was campaigning, I received an education in not garbage disposal, but recycling. And I want to suggest to Barbadians that this is one of the areas in which communities can get going, the recycling effort. I was invited to Atlantic Shores one Saturday morning, and I thought I was going to see just people come there and put things onto a truck, and the truck drives away. But I saw a social experiment that was so uplifting. First of all, people were gathering in this area on a Saturday morning. They were bringing items from their home, which was not garbage. It was recyclable material. And families were there, young children were there, parents were there, old people were there. And it was a whole social milieu that was so uplifting that I had to spread it, and I want to recommend it to every community in Barbados, a community recycling project as a way of, why are you smiling like that, Crystal? As a way of, as a way of bringing communities together. And this is something that I have been proposing from St. Lucie to St. Philip to St. Thomas. I hope the minister is still with us. It is one excellent way of bringing communities back to life, having people interact, having people cease to be car numbers and telephone numbers and WhatsApp profiles, having people become real again. And these are community projects. You see, cricket has disappeared. Look, the decline of the BCL has hurt social life in Barbados. The decline of the BCA cricket has hurt social life in Barbados. What is it that young people are congregating around in the road, precisely. Road cricket has, that's why I said we've modernized, but we have not developed. And we need community projects in Barbados, and that is where the People's Assemblies come in. The organization of community projects. David has been largely responsible for the community welfare and oversight teams. That has largely been David's contribution, apart from the other contributions he's made. But he feels very strongly about that. We are not interacting. We are not developing as a community. And I want to recommend recycling programs across Barbados for all Barbadians, not necessarily to resolve the issue of garbage, but to resolve the problem of the social interaction that is not taking place in Barbados. And of course, to make the case for recycling, we might end up needing fewer garbage trucks if we have proper recycling programs in Barbados. And that is that is a part of the education I received that Saturday morning, that you could cut your what we throw away by 50%, and we wouldn't be complaining when we don't see the garbage truck once a week or twice every week. These are the ways our society needs to develop again, and it can only develop by community interaction. That's why community interaction is so important. I say this on TV last Sunday. I go to North America, and you see the most pristine, the most beautiful suburbs. It's as if you're watching television, but you walk through them, you don't see a man. You don't see as we say in Barbados, you don't see a boy. You see no one. So that it is like plastic. It is beautiful to look at, but it is not a beautiful existence to my mind, because, David, there is very, very little community interaction. Beautiful places to look at. This Barbados is a beautiful place because of the social interaction that we've had. Tourists come here and say it. When they talk about Barbadians being friendly, they're talking about a spirit of interaction, a spirit of community. They go and see people sitting down around shops. I asked a man in a suburb in Boston, but where are the people? I walk through any neighborhood in Barbados Sunday evening, somebody is sitting and plaiting a child's hair. A man is out there washing his car. A man is playing music. Sometimes he plays it too loudly, but you see people. You get the feel of people. And that is what this society with modernization is losing. That is why the People's Assemblies are so important. I'm extremely happy that Minister Ford joined us this evening, because I know she feels strongly about community interaction and community activity in Barbados. So we want to commend this. look, the people of Barbados have no choice but to see this system being successful. Otherwise, Crystal, your generation will suffer in a completely different Barbados from what we've enjoyed. This is not for us. We belong to the generation that will retire very shortly. This is for your generation. And we want to see your generation have the quality of life that we had in the 60s and 70s and 80s, perhaps.
I was smiling because I was actually going through my head thinking that my generation's idea of community is very different in that even in my neighborhood,
That was facetious. Ignore that.
I personally don't really know anybody in my neighborhood, but the community that we've developed as young persons, I can go to certain events and know almost everybody at that event, and they're not a part of my neighborhood.
Is that the internet?
Not just the internet. Talk about in-person things. We do have an internet connectivity, and we do love our internet.
Dr. Trevor Shepard wrote a very interesting letter in The Nation this week. You saw it?
No, I did not.
Okay, all right, we'll discuss that another time.
Our idea of community is very different, but I do see the value even in my deliberate choice to choose a gym that is in my neighborhood and being able to connect with persons in that way, and knowing that we, even with that community spirit, that taking care of each other, it gives us a sense of belonging to a tribe. And from a lot of research, that helps with issues of depression and mental distress. So there is a high level of research value in building that community spirit.
Crystal, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think you have Sam Clark from New York with us.
No problem. Does he want to make a contribution?
I'm sure. He
Sure.
does.
Hello? Hello?
Hi,
Hearing
we
you.
can hear you.
Hi, good evening. It was nice to join you in this kind of community effort. I fully concur in what people Assemblies is about, and I think it's bring it from an organic perspective and not from the top down. And a great issue when you mentioned about communities and people gathering, where is a problem I have, and why are there lack of social places? There are no social centers there, but there are schools in the areas that are closed in the evening. Why is this so, and why can we do to change such events like that? I mean, use the schools as a source of the community space, and that could greatly enhance a lot of the malignant and stuff that's going on the street. If we can just use some of these public spaces, they're already there already. It's only about utilizing.
I think Sam has fallen off.
Well, in addition to the schools, there are also the community centers. And you know, one of the functions that we have proposed is the community development, to take community development and sports to another level, where we are proposing that the People's Assembly will be brought together to partner with the National Sports Council, the Community Development Department, and the National Cultural Foundation to put together sports and artistic and cultural programs for the community that will, first of all, make full use of the existing community centers, but could also make use of school halls and other school entities, and specifically cultural and artistic programs to be undertaken could set out to incorporate actors, artists, musicians, etc. from within the assembly area, and could also showcase the local community heritage for the benefit of both locals and tourists. So this is really a recognition that we need to be doing a lot more in this area. We need to perhaps get back to the heights of the kind of artistic and cultural and sporting community activity that we used to have in communities in Barbados back in the 1970s. for example. So again, the idea is that the People's Assembly will bring a new impetus, will bring a new organizing structure, and lift up these activities. Back to you, Crystal.
We have some other comments on Facebook, and I hope I can get them all in before we end around 7 o'clock. So we have Mr. Roach trying to generate the idea of having a community bank. Let me make sure, yes. And that making the statement that savings would lead to investment of funds and the profits of those investments feeds the infrastructure of the community, something that we have lost through the sale of the BNB, Barbados National Bank. And I understand his sentiment wholeheartedly. If the People's Assemblies were to evolve to the point where we could have community banks, to me, that would be a very ambitious and huge achievement in the cap of that particular community. I would love to see that happen. As to the logistics of how it would work out, I hope we can figure out something like that. That would be very exciting to me personally.
Crystal, would you say bank or credit union?
It probably would be more like a credit union.
More like a credit union, yeah.
A lot of intricacies with a bank that the credit union does not have. Is like an evolved kind of meeting turn for sure, but some financial institution where local persons will be able to have some financial assistance amongst each other. So we have Miss Hunt, Devani Hunt, sorry, just throwing ideas out there as it pertains to structure. Perhaps the central head of the local assemblies be a senator and funding derived from the consolidated fund, therefore making it independent. The same way that the judiciary in some way can be accountable to Parliament, likewise the executive, the Central Council of Local Government too would be accountable to Parliament. Does anybody want to make a comment on that?
I was just saying to David, look, the public consultations are so important. I was just whispering to David, and he's smiling, that further to Ms. Hunt's idea, she is saying, look, let us have a reconstituted Senate so that the head of each People's Assembly becomes a senator in the Parliament. That's a very interesting idea. I want to congratulate Ms. Hunt.
Yeah.
Mr. Hunt, I beg his pardon.
Pulse Business Consultancy is saying that they'd like to think that a treasurer and robust, transparent process should be sufficient. Creating a bank introduces complexities that may not be productive. So we did go through, yes, the exact wording may not be there, but the sentiment behind having the community with their own financial independence definitely is something you would like to explore.
We have the idea of the People's Assemblies organizing some kind of collective community business. One idea was a food producing farm, but that doesn't have to be the only idea. But we felt that you know, in light of the fact that entrepreneurship and business development is so important, that it would be good if the People's Assemblies could bring people together and establish some type of cooperative business enterprise. You know, in the rural areas, we could easily see a food producing farm being very, very relevant and very workable. But credit union, we should not restrict our ideas. So the idea of the bank or the credit union does in fact fit into the original thinking of the People's Assembly having some type of cooperative business entity. And yes, I would want to thank that contributor for the idea of I wouldn't say bank, but let's say credit union. So let's say cooperative, some kind of cooperative credit union, so that we have a number of different business ideas that we could look at that might be appropriate for the people's assemblies. Yeah, yeah, and you know the thing is, that kind of cooperative business provides an outlet, especially for your young people, young adults, you know, to get involved, to be part of, you know, to be part of something constructive where they can express themselves, they can express their entrepreneurship and productive capacities. That's why I like the idea also of the security function, because you know we have many young men sometimes who are seen as predators in the community. But if we could turn that predator into a protector, if we could give that young man who might be full of energy and looking for a constructive social function to perform, well, a constructive social function for a young man with a lot of physical strength and energy is to be a protector of the community, to be properly trained, to you know, be properly trained in security skills and so forth, and steered in that direction. So the possibilities are really endless. But yes, if we can find projects that will help young people who might be searching for something constructive to feel part of, and we can provide those opportunities, whether they be collective businesses or some kind of community security function. So let the ideas flow, folks. We appreciate all of the ideas. We are still in the ideas gathering phase. And we have, after this town hall meeting, we have 2 more to go. And once we complete those 2, we will sit down and we will examine all of the ideas that have been put before us and come up with a final design for this system of people's assemblies.
To Sam in New York, Sam Clark, we're sorry we lost contact with him, but we got a lot of what he was saying in terms of using the state's infrastructure to further community work in Barbados. So thanks very much to Sam Clark for that contribution.
Sam's hand is still raised. I'm not sure if he wants to continue
Yes.
his.
Yes. Welcome, Sam. Welcome back.
All right, thanks again. First, again, I want to thank you all for this program and this movement, the People Assembly. I mean, this is a thing long overdue, and I'm glad that it's come to some kind of fruition. And hopefully by November we'll have it active. I wish that we had that when we were growing up in Barbados, because a lot of the stuff that we are seeing around the neighborhoods will never be out of hand, especially a lot with dealing with crime, because you will be having hands on, you know, the people in the community, et cetera, et cetera. Case in point. When we talk about building the community, there can also be a community partnership with the businesses in the whole throughout the island. Okay, again, government is not all and cannot do all and everything. However, there are certain things that government can put in the infrastructure and put in the plans in the way to help the little communities to build out. Okay, when we look at a case in point, you look at the Esplanade in St. James in Fitz Village, where I come from. I'm from St. James. This has been in disrepair for umpteen years, for years and years, and yet still this is an eyesore. It's a window to the sea. Now, if we can get the community, if we had these kind of people assemblies in place, we might be able to get a Jordan supermarket to sponsor the repairs of this beautiful place, this window to the sea. So I'm glad that we are coming to some direction with this. That Barbados is on the way finally to have this kind of people assembly that will be able to have impact on their community, even in the building, in the zoning, and it will have teeth, an organization or committee that will have teeth. I'm grateful and I'm following you all the way through these meetings, and I think it's a step in the right direction that is long overdue. Thank you.
Very much, Sam, and keep up the activism in New York. I read you quite a lot.
Yes, we will. Keep doing.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We actually have a number of comments on Facebook, and I'm going to get all in before we end today. There's Kathy is stating that the idea of community will continue to evolve, so do not denigrate the positive use of social media, especially amongst those under 35. And I think in the time of COVID, we have come to appreciate how much social media and technology has been able to help to keep us still connected. It's not the ideal that we would like. I would love to be able to sit there amongst everyone and interact and have that physical connection. But in lieu of that, we at least are not in the position where we have no communication or connection at all. We still have the ability to reach out and connect with each other. So let's always look at both the positives and not just focus on the negatives for any particular form.
Crystal,
So
please tell Kathy that post-COVID, and COVID will end, I hope, tell her that there will never be any compensation for human contact. Yes? And that after COVID ends, technology still will not be enough.
No better alternative.
we have
Precisely.
another point saying that Mr. Thorne is totally correct. There is a decline in civil society organization with the modernization. What I will say though, there is still a strong sense of community in the villages as opposed to the suburban areas. I guess that's why I'm not connected to anyone. I think the local governments would help in rebuilding those civil society groups, or maybe there needs to be a rebuilding of civil groups to make the local government effective. And Kathy is saying that she thinks community centers would be a better option for social interaction. And in some sports, you have a winner. And Justin is supporting the statement that younger persons definitely still line outside. So we do have that physical interaction. Again, as I was saying, it's different. It's not necessarily community based, but we have events that we would connect with each other with. And your daughters, both your daughters are social butterflies. I can tell you they probably socialize with persons in Barbados as wide and as far from St. Lucie right down to Christchurch, more so than they probably interact with their own neighborhoods. So there was another comment here that I thought was very important, and I want to make sure I get it in before we end. And the general idea of it was that the person was saying they made a proposal to one of the ministers, and he has not had any traction on it. And that is exactly why we want to establish this local governance, because there are 285,000 persons in Barbados. There are about 30 MPs. If each person who has an idea or project tries to funnel it through an MP, you can understand the bottleneck and why certain things are not done. And even if it's a great idea, it may not get the traction. And the days of funneling an idea solely through a minister, we have to find another way to be able to get all of those ideas heard and having a community deciding, we really like this idea, we really want this to go forward. How do we communicate with government that we would like resources allocated to this project rather than something that we have no interest in? That is the whole crux behind the local governance. We don't want situations where great ideas die because everybody is trying to channel them through the same person. So I wanted to really bring home that point before we ended. And
Before we end, our technical managers here are telling us that we can go beyond 7 o'clock.
okay,
So
great.
no need to rush into 7 feeling that you have to end. Let us have the discussion continue after 7 o'clock.
Problem. Just was not sure if you had a time limit on as well. So we have Justin saying that interactions really took off in the late 90s when communities were given sports facilities for road tennis, basketball, and football. And I believe this is also one of Adrian's areas of love and support.
Also roasting breadfruit and frying barbers and potfish. This is a regular activity on the weekend. Now everybody want to go to Chef Fat and Burger King and all kind of fancy restaurants, fast food places. But there's definitely roasting the breadfruit in the community. The interaction. Then you play dominoes, the boys lime on the block. Relax yourself, to bring a little beverage to drink. Maybe not mobby, but you know, you socialize. So we have lost that in the community. On my way down here today, I passed fellas under the breadfruit tree, roasting breadfruit, about 12 of them, playing some dub music and enjoying themselves. Coming a little further down the road, fellas playing dominoes, you know, in the car park. I went up the road and buy something to eat, and I saw the fellas on the beach liming, and they were roasting barbers, the fishery there, about 15 or 16 different species of pot fish, and the fellas was cleaning them, no salt, no lime, Bristol. You just clean them, bam, on the fire, and the fellas eating with the fingers. So we gotta retain this. We gotta get back to the old time days, you know. The community spirit lacking.
Tell Kathy the technology cannot do that.
That's what the people assemblies are all about.
We will take the good parts of the old time days and we will bring those back. And I am still gonna completely embrace my technology because I much rather prefer someone WhatsApp me than
A virtual roasted fish.
I can roast my breadfruit on my stove, you know.
No.
I'll put it on Facebook.
No.
I'll frustrate people.
Not on the stove. No. You burn on the house.
Listen, I don't know if anybody gonna allow me to burn an open fire outside. People have concerns about me doing anything like that.
Honestly, Crystal, we do appreciate that the young generation, they have really embraced this communications technology. And yes, there are other ways of social interaction that have evolved. And so the two, we need to marry the strengths of the two, because there's no substitute for physical organization and interaction, communities coming together. There's no substitute for that. But at the same time, the communications technology has created additional, I think we should see them as additional opportunities for people to be connected, and to be connected in even a more extensive circles. So yes, we would want the People's Assembly to deploy the best of both worlds, and the People's Assembly must definitely be an institution for the young generation. In fact, the buy-in of the young generation is going to be key to the success of the People's Assemblies. I have a message here for you, Crystal, that there are some comments in the Zoom chat that you need to check.
Did they go to everyone or to me? Because I have been checking the Zoom chat, but I wasn't seeing any comments that I could share. There's one from Ryan Dalrymple, which says, "Good evening all. Listening to the discussion today sounds just like what the last administration. I have heard nothing new. So why should I be interested in this new entity?"
Wow. If this person has to be kidding. I mean, the thing is very different. To begin with, we're not talking about organizing on a constituency basis. That's number one. Okay? We are emphasizing parishes. Number two, we are talking about the democratic elective principle. We are not talking about assembly persons selected by a government minister. We are talking about the people in the communities engaging in elections that will be held under the auspices of the Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Number three, we are talking about a whole host of functions, substantial functions. We are not talking about bringing together a constituency assembly to put on a football tournament, for example. No, we are talking, listen, we are actually talking about the rules of Parliament, of the House of Assembly and the Senate being amended, the standing orders being amended to say that proposals coming up from the People's Assembly must be considered by Parliament, that there will be a funnel of proposals coming up from the People's Assembly into Parliament for the consideration of Parliament. We are talking about giving the assemblies the power to grant vendors licenses, for example, and to determine where vendors could set up. I mean, we can go on and on. We're talking about assembly persons being assigned seats on school boards. So, I mean, we are talking about something with real substance here, substantial functions that go way beyond the previous idea that, unfortunately, really did suffer from the taint of partisanship. And if there's one thing there are several things that distinguish the two, but a central one will be that there will be no idea of any government minister selecting assemblymen and women, all up to the people in their constituents, in their communities, to vote for who they wish to represent them.
Please tell Ryan that we've had a brilliant suggestion this evening by this forum, through this forum, that is, a member of the public, either Mr. or Mrs. Hunt, Mr. Hunt, who has come up with a brilliant suggestion. Maybe long-term, could be short-term, depending on the will of government and the will of the people, that the heads of each People's Assembly could become the senator in a reconstituted Senate of Barbados. I mean, it took this afternoon for us to hear that. We have not even discussed that, David and Adrian, among ourselves. That's a brilliant suggestion. We know that in the United States, you can have gridlock. If the president wants something and a branch of the Congress doesn't want it, they can hold them up and close down government. I suppose that could happen, but what Mr. Hunt has suggested can alter our democratic tradition in such a fundamental way. It actually takes the people, David, into Parliament. It takes the people into Parliament and gives the people an opportunity to say whether the House of Assembly, to say whether the lower chamber is passing law that is acceptable, not to an upper chamber, but to the people of Barbados. And that's a brilliant suggestion.
Even if in order to preserve the power of the government to get its legislation through Parliament, to preserve the strength in numbers, even if they only come on board as deliberative members who come to contribute to the discussion in Parliament. So there are many ways in which we could fine-tune the idea to make it workable. But I do take the point that it is a brilliant idea that was put on the table here. If you can make that physical link between the People's Assemblies and the House of Parliament itself. The other point I want to make, to emphasize, Crystal, is the idea of the youth members of the Assembly. And we need to make this clear. We are proposing that all of the secondary schools and the tertiary institutions of the Samuel Jackman Prescott Polytechnic, the Community College, and the University of the West Indies will have the right to place members on the People's Assemblies. The educational institutions, they will select the members themselves. They will select their own members. And one idea has been that we should not put any age limit on the membership coming from the schools. It's a very compelling idea that if you have a second former who is, very good in terms of civic activity and mature for his or her age and really wants to make a contribution and is capable of making a contribution, why restrict that person? There's also been the suggestion that members of the community of persons living with disabilities, that we should provide special provision for those organizations to place representatives on the People's Assembly. So in addition to the elected members, the other two possible categories, well, one we are already sold on, that is the youth or student members, but there was also coming out of the town hall meetings was the proposal that persons with disabilities should also be treated as a special category. That's something we will have to discuss among ourselves. So yeah, very, very different from the constituency councils. Over to you, Crystal.
I also must echo my support for that suggestion that came. I love it personally because it gives the people a say in who they would like to have representing them even more and at that level. And this actually came up when we were on the People's Business, when Barney would have made the suggestion about it being a potential gateway into politics. And I echo that as well, but in a new way where persons who would be coming up to be able to make those representations would be persons who are seen as community leaders, who have the endorsement and the backing and support of their communities because they were voted for by these persons, and they have represented that there are persons who are able to produce results, who are able to bring the community together. And then these are the kind of persons we want representing us at that governmental level. So this is a new way to be able to even bring back that thing that is missing, where when persons hear about a politician, you have this mix of it being a respected office, but also perceived simultaneously as a corrupt position because of the history of what has even gone on well beyond the last two administrations. We have the Auditor General's report highlighting things that have an area of concern. If we have persons who are chosen by the people, it could bring back that high level of respect to that particular career that is sorely needed in Barbados. So I definitely think that we should include that, and I hope that persons, because obviously we are now coming on to the end of these town halls, but persons who would have contributed to past town halls could say if they also would support this idea, so that we have a representative voice where this is concerned. It's not just us saying that we love this idea and including it.
Could we ask Mr. Hunt to attach his name? That is such an important suggestion. Attach his name to it and do a written submission to us, even if it is on that alone.
Submission.
You got him covered. Thank you very much.
Yes, do a written submission. I had some other persons who said that they're going to do written submissions, and I'm going to hold them to it, because these ideas, I think once they're fleshed out and have some more research behind them, could be valuable to developing the ideas and the proposals that we have for the People's Assemblies. We have Justin making the suggestion that we should get the youth involved at community centers, learning coding, robotics, and electronic repairs. And I would actually extend this not just to the youth, but to persons who do not have a great grasp of the technology, because we realized in COVID that because of this situation, a lot of persons were forced to pick it up. And it was a lot more difficult because they didn't have the opportunity to have a class where persons could sit down and show them and explain and everything else. They had to literally learn on the fly. I've heard stories even on the calling programs where older persons were calling and almost in tears trying to figure out how to use a bank card, an ATM card. And in this time, I would hope that we don't leave those kind of persons behind either, in terms of being able to understand technology that can make their lives easier and reduce their risk exposure to COVID. I myself have I think I went to the bank once since COVID, because I've been doing almost all of my transactions exclusively online. That has significantly been able to help me reduce my risk exposure by not having to go to a bank or having to stand up in a short pay line or having to go to a vendor. So helping these groups to be able to understand the technology and not feel intimidated by it, but to show them how it can help improve their way of life. I think that's also something that the People's Assemblies can do in the same community well-being category. Let me go through and see if we have any other comments.
Before
We
you,
have a lot.
before
Go ahead.
before you go on, Crystal, the area regarding the opening of community centers and pavilions is something that we will have to put to the table, because as it is now, some of them are closed at night. Although
Yeah.
they have caretakers, but there's no activity. But once the people in the community know that they are open and they can be used, this is where that we could go. So we're very happy for this information this afternoon, that there are people in the community who will let the community centers to be open at night for various activities. For example, in St. Thomas alone, there's Bridgefield and Bagatelle, which is heavily utilized for all kind of sporting activities. And I think that's the way that we could go. And we would definitely investigate it.
That came up
Across
in
the board.
the Townhall by Passage Road, where that just the idea of having to be able to use community centers and the difficulties people have and how important it is for some persons to help encourage their young persons to be actively involved instead of being idle. That was a heavily discussed topic at the St. Michael Town Hall.
And that is a heavy utilized facility. You have about 7 or 8 groups, culture, sports. It varies.
We have a few comments of outrage that the Assemblies is a far cry from the constituency councils. At least they will hope so, because the constituency councils were failures. And several other similar sentiments are coming through on the Facebook feed. Oh boy, so social media is so entertaining.
While you're on that, Crystal, or you wanna continue? I wanted to address an issue that none of us wants to talk about, the absence of the public or the residents from the community centers, and to say to the panel and to Barbadians that a lot of people may be absenting themselves because of crime, and that is something we have to admit. And it isn't the police alone that can solve crime. The community has to solve crime. The community has a lot of intelligence as to criminal activity, and it is criminal activity in part that is chasing people even off the playing fields in communities. People are absent because sometimes they don't know if somebody's going to run a crossfire and a gun. And that is something that a properly effective People's Assembly can deal with, because a lot of crime is exploiting the lack of community interaction. People are not interacting, and as David used the word earlier, predator. The predators are becoming prominent in the community. They're taking advantage of people's absence, and people are absenting themselves because of the presence of the predator in the community. And that is something, and that deepens the need for the existence of People's Assembly, so that the people in Barbados can work harmoniously with the police in arresting, no pun intended, and arresting the issue of crime. But that is something we don't wish to talk about, but it is one of the major problems in this country, and it has to be dealt with.
Well, I mean, that's why this People's Assembly initiative is so important. We know what we have in Barbados, but we also know that we're in danger of losing it. We can just look across the Caribbean at some of our neighbors, and we know what we don't want to be. You know, I think we can call names. We look at Trinidad. We look at some parts of Jamaica. We don't want to go there. But if we don't want to, the signs are there that that's where we're heading. If we don't want to go there, we need to have this kind of intervention that brings communities back together, that where we look out for each other, we make sure that no one falls through the cracks. And we even go as far as to look at collective community security, where we engage those young men who otherwise might drift off in a different direction. We give them that positive, respected, constructive social role to play. But generally speaking, we create an ethos which says that everyone matters, and we're looking out for everyone, and we're looking for opportunities for everyone. That is how ultimately you solve crime. Not just by policing, locking up people, arresting people, but about creating a nurturing, caring social environment. And we have the capacity to do that in Barbados, but we just have to make the effort. And this is all about making that effort. Back to you, Crystal.
As someone who has recently had an attempted robbery, I could say that that was a very terrifying experience, and I can't pretend it hasn't changed how I move around. You're very much way more cautious about whoever comes around the house and everything else. So as I'm sure many persons who've been touched by something like that, it does change your perspective about a lot of things. But I will say the one positive that came out of it, well, at least for our end, is that we're much more aware, because our neighbors were also impacted. We're much more aware of trying to look out and make sure that nothing is happening around them, especially if you think that they're alone. You want them to be reassured that, we're here next door and we'll do what we can to help you if something like that ever happens again. So yes, I could agree that community spirit, having a community well-being team where we could report those kind of things and know that there's someone looking out for us that's close by and not a police that may not be able to get there quickly, that really helps a lot to increase the feeling of safety within the neighborhoods. So I wholeheartedly welcome that aspect.
Another area we have to look at too is once upon a time we had a very vibrant community police program whereby the policemen used to interact on a regular basis with the members of the community. You will see the policemen playing games, socializing with the fellas. This is an area that I think we have to get back to. And there's too much of a disconnect between law authority and young people especially. The bridge is too big. And getting back to community policing will help solve that problem in a major, major way. And in addition, I want to inform the public also, we have a very strong line dancing program in Barbados where a number of our communities and pavilions are occupied at night by expatriates and the older generation. And they come and they have programs in these facilities at night doing line dancing. They also do games like worry and dominoes and chess and whist. So those pavilions are being used for those things right now. And if there are any people who are being left out or believe that they can't get involved, we the People's Committee, the People's Assemblies would ensure that these things are done for them, because we are talking about community activities. We need to have somewhere open for them that they could go to express themselves, feel comfortable, express their views, and feel safe.
Adrian's intervention reminds me that, Crystal, one of our earlier proposals had been for a police officer to sit on every People's Assembly to reestablish that sense of partnership between the community and the police officer. And I still feel strongly about that, and I still hope it is something that can happen in the future. I remember going to the St. George meeting, Crystal, in, what's up there called, Market Hill? Not Market Hill, the other one, up from Charles O'Bridge. And yeah. I thought it was such a brilliant idea to have a police station in a complex with a community center and a library. I had never seen it before in Barbados. And that was a way, not only symbolically, but physically, of bringing the community together with the police and demystifying the police force, allowing the public to see that the police is not about force, but the police ought to be about friendship and community interaction. And that meeting was memorable for me because it was the first time I'd seen the facility. And I was very pleased that the police officers were working in close proximity to upstanding members of the community who were coming there and carrying out their civic duties.
Well, that one was memorable for me as well. Even though I technically live in St. Michael, I'm on the border of St. George and I consider myself a Georgette. Most of my community and interaction is actually around the Glebe, Charles O'Bridge, St. George area. So, and the turnout for that town hall was very good as well. The community center was pretty packed. And I felt safer because the police station was right there. That somebody would have to be very bold to come and attack us right next to a police station. So I think things like that also when we're talking about town hall, town and country planning, seeing the benefits of something like that and having it replicated in the future, if we have anything like that going on, we can share. Because one of the comments also on Facebook was being able to have cross interactions with people's assemblies. And I guess the idea was to share best practices. So what may have worked for one, you don't necessarily have to keep that idea to yourself, but also to have interactions amongst each other to say, this has been working well for us. Let's see if this is going to work for you. We know it's not always able to just wholesale pass on to every single idea, but at least you'll be able to get persons to share best practices. We have 2 questions coming in from the Zoom chat where one person is saying, what are some of the projects that we believe would generate the buy-in of young persons? And I think that Justin on Facebook would have touched on some of those areas. But in general, this is my personal belief, and I hope that persons in the people's assemblies buy into it. I think having more practical approaches to entrepreneurship would be really great, because we encourage persons to get into entrepreneurship. And I am a strong proponent of making sure people are very prepared, because we make it seem as though it's a bed of roses when it really is not. It's a lot of work. And there are places like Ernst & Young, they currently have an EY entrepreneurship program going on that I would say is excellent. And in a short space of time, they've been able to help persons to go through the legal requirements, tax requirements, marketing requirements, the structure and everything that's required for entrepreneurship, the financial, everything. And it's not done yet, but these are the kind of things people need to see, how you actually fill out a business registration form, not just know that that's what you have to fill out, but how you actually fill it out so that CAIPO doesn't send you back because you used the wrong color ink or because you didn't fill out something properly. All the documents you need, how you're filing something for tax purposes, what hands-on practical advice. So the theoretical thing isn't working anymore. That would be my number one, if I could, because it's not taught in schools. So you become a doctor, a plumber, a lawyer, whatever the case may be, and people assume that you're going to know how to run a business or run your own practice. And I know there are many persons in those professions who decide to go on their own that don't know how to do financial statements. They don't know how to engage in marketing. They don't know a lot of things that are very crucial and important to being a successful entrepreneur. So that would be my personal contribution to one of the projects. I would love to see the people's assemblies collaborate with entities. There are lots of entities that can put on these kind of programs so that young persons could go out there, and not just persons who have skills, because I found too in a lot of these assemblies, we've been focused on persons with skills, but persons with education, like from the University of the West Indies and the Bard's Community College, they also need to understand what it takes to be an entrepreneur so that they're successful in whatever practice that they do, because successful small businesses, I believe that's what's going to help to drive this economy into improving.
Well, the point is that that kind of program could easily come under community development and sports function. I think another area that would definitely capture, or even the community well-being teams. I mean, the community well-being teams could organize that kind of program for young people. I think the community forum would also be of great interest to young people. And the education function, because we are talking about bringing together in a think tank all of the youth assemblymen and women, along with assemblymen and women who will be sitting on school boards. So we're talking about putting together real brains trust, bringing together these young people with the assemblymen and women who are directly involved in education to brainstorm ideas for better schooling, improvements to the curriculum, improvements to the school program, to generate ideas that could then be fed back to the system, to the Ministry of Education, to the schools, and so forth. So I would think that those would be aspects of it that should be of great interest to our youth. Back at you.
I have Kathy also highlighting the St. George Parish Independence Committee. They also had an entrepreneurship workshop that was very hands-on as well, and shared a lot of information that I would have benefited from. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to complete the program because the days changed, but for what I would have participated in, this was a community that would have a community organization that would have put this on and had persons from the St. George community participating and benefiting. And this is where I definitely think best practices could be shared, because we would love for every community to have something like that. And I definitely hope that these people's assemblies, whoever is elected to be on these assemblies, would push these kind of ideas so that the young people can feel as though they're getting the right tools to help them to be able to enrich themselves and to move their lives forward.
Any more public interventions, Crystal?
That seems to be it so far. A lot of the comments are things that are agreeing or, agreeing with us or each other. So that's the gist of what we're saying right now. But I think it seems from the comments that persons enjoy the session and they're looking forward to people's assemblies. They're seeing some people pushing for the November deadline. Mm-hmm. So we definitely have our work cut out for us to make sure that we do not disappoint anyone.
November deadline, Crystal, is for the submission of our report to government, and not for the passage of the legislation. After we submit it to government, it is up to government to decide when is the right time. And we would hope that it is in 2021, David and Adrian. We hope that it is 2021 when this legislation can find its way through Parliament.
If it doesn't, I hope that all the persons who've been commenting and following would lobby very hard.
Yes.
To have it done. Really would need the backing of the people to make sure that it goes through.
I think we need to be very, just to reiterate and emphasize what Ralph said, because we need people to be very clear. Our job as the Thorne Commission is to have these public consultations, to take on board the views of the public, and then to prepare a model that we then deliver to the Cabinet of Barbados. Once we have done that, we have completed our mission. It is then for the Cabinet of Barbados to look at what we have put before them, to determine, maybe they will determine they accept it in its totality, or they may decide they need to modify it in certain respects. But anyhow, it will be up to the Cabinet of Barbados to come up with the final configuration, the final structure, and having done so, then to take it to Parliament, to have it legislated, and after it's legislated, then to implement it. So it is our hope that the the system will start sometime in the year 2021. So as Mr. Thorne has said, our 30th of November deadline is really to complete our work and to present to the Cabinet of Barbados a fully fleshed out and developed concept of people's assemblies for their consideration and further action.
Crystal, based on public consultation, so that what we give to the government of Barbados will be a reflection not only of our own deliberations, but a reflection of how the people of Barbados feel in terms of the model that we are going to present to the government. So that even at this stage, we are being fully democratic.
If anyone from the panel has any final closing comments, I'd invite you to give them now.
I would like to encourage all the people in the community, especially the young ones, to come out, attend the other assemblies that we're going to have in the various parishes. Come and share your ideas. There's nothing written in stone. We're just going about gathering information, and as the gentleman said, we're going to come up with the final document. I want to thank the Honorable Minister for welcoming us in St. Thomas, and I may look forward to many more meetings. Honorable Minister, your closing comments?
You can unmute yourself.
Sure, thank you. I want to say thanks to all those persons who were actively engaged. The ideas have been excellent ones, and I believe that going forward, we will have additional aspects of this program that we can offer to the people of Barbados, because at the end of the day, we're one people, one nation, working together to build our society, and through this, we can leave a legacy behind for generations to come. So I want to thank all of you as well for participating, and we look forward to November when we lay this information in the House of Assembly, and then we can work together to make a difference early in the new year. Thank you so much, and God bless you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And thanks to the people of St. Thomas for having us.
And Minister, we want to thank you for, you certainly attended a lot of the town halls that we've had. I don't think the government could have chosen a better minister to supervise this process. You being one of Barbados's better known community workers, certainly within St. Thomas. And we feel happy that you are the minister who's been asked to supervise this process and to have this work carried out under your ministry. And we want to thank you for attending those several town hall meetings, for giving your time. We want to thank you for being present this evening, virtually, as the young people would say. And we hope that when we present this to the cabinet, that your voice will be as strong there as it is within this domain and within the public domain. And when David says it's an independence gift, and when we give that independence gift to the Cabinet of Barbados, we will be relying on you, Minister Ford, to reflect the overwhelming majority of the people of Barbados to carry this project through. I think the government will be left with no choice except to do it based on your ability in that forum and based on the will of the people of Barbados. We are now entirely satisfied that the overwhelming majority of people in Barbados across the partisan divide, that they want a system that is pure and that is effective and that will work for Barbadians. Look, we have said that this is not a partisan project. We believe that it is the purest model that we can find, and we want to assure Barbadians that we have done it in the pureness of spirit and the pureness of intent. So thank you very much, Minister.
And taking off your community hat, you are an original community practitioner of the highest priority. You are a giant. So we owe you.
I owe you all too for your commitment and dedication. May God continue to kindle that spirit of volunteerism spreading into all arteries of Barbados. Thank you so much, Madam Crystal, as well. And we appreciate the contribution you're making. It's a tremendous sacrifice, but at the end of the day, all Barbadians will benefit by the input. So thank you too.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to thank our chair and deputy chair who's given so much of their time to this project. I definitely would like to thank all the persons who have contributed, whether it was written or oral submissions, the social media interactions. We could not have done this without you. And we definitely look forward to the next town hall, which will be for the people of St. John on August 17th. That is next Sunday from 5 to 7 p.m. And then we have our last town hall on August 30th. All of this information can be found on our Facebook and Instagram page. Please like, share, follow, subscribe, tell your friends, invite them. If there's anything you disagree with, please put the comments on Facebook. If there's anything you love, again, put the comments on social media, or you can email them to us at thorne.commission@barbados.gov.bb. And if there's any of this information you don't remember, it's on the social media. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your contributions. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful evening. Bye.
Bye.